Okay, sorry about that. Had to get my daughter off the bus. Happens when you're working from home. Okay, anyway, I was talking about a fatwa. So the idea then is that a person, gets a fatwa, an opinion, telling them whether the action they want to do is, a forbidden action that they absolutely must not do, or they're going to go to hell for it or something, or whether it's a negative action that they should avoid doing, but it's not absolutely forbidden, or whether perhaps it is a neutral, doesn't really matter, what color hat you wear or something like that, or it's a favorable action that they'll really sort of, accumulate some religious credit for, but it's not absolutely obligatory, or it's a mandatory action that everybody has to do. Okay, so sort of a 5-point scale that your action might be on. The authority of the fatwa depends on the authority of the person issuing it. And I can step out of early classical Islam for a moment here and explain one thing about modern Islam. This is one of the things which you need to understand whenever you're watching the news, when there's news about the Muslim world and something comes out that somebody or other has issued a fatwa about this or that. The modern Muslim world is very fragmented, very divided, lots of argumentation going on about what direction Islam is going in and how to interpret the Islamic religion in the modern world. So you will very often see what we call radical or extremist people claiming the status of an Islam, issuing fatwas on this or that, telling someone to go, perform a suicide bombing or something horrific of that kind. And so you hear, a fatwa has been issued for people to go assassinate somebody or kill some writer or, commit a terrorist action. For the Muslim world as a whole, those fatwas do not carry authority because most Muslims do not acknowledge the person issuing the fatwa as having authority. Okay, or only a few Muslims do, or a certain sector of the Muslim world does. And very often the majority of Muslims do not acknowledge the legitimacy of the fatwa because they don't consider the person issuing it to have authority. Okay, so that's something to be aware of. Whenever you see these sort of things in the news, it's not just sort of one united Muslim world where somebody issues a fatwa in some corner and now all Muslims are following that. Instead is all these various factions and schools of thought and movements, and very often the fatwas only carry authority for a limited body of followers. Okay, anyway, as far as how does the imam determine the fatwa, he's not supposed to just make it up. Rather, there's a hierarchy of authorities that he appeals to in order to determine what his fatwa ought to be on any given question. Highest authority is the Quran, right? Because as I said in the first part of this pair of video lectures on Islam, the Quran is considered to be the literal words of God, not just inspired by God, but actually dictated by God and copied down. And so if an idea is expressed clearly and unambiguously in the Quran, or the Quran can be interpreted in a way that's clear and unambiguous on the question, then that trumps everything else, and the Quran will carry the day on that one. Even so, there is still some room there. For example, the imams consider some of the parts of the Quran were given for specific situations that Muhammad was in and were later abrogated by later surahs of the Quran that contradict them. So there's a certain amount of scholarship to sort out, which is which and what belongs in what category. Anyway, if the Quran is not clear on an issue, then the next thing you turn to is what are called the hadith, which are traditions, oral traditions about the Prophet and about his early companions, anecdotes about things they are supposed to have said or things that they did, and these may also address how to do this or that, a particular way of saying a prayer, or, whether a particular, how to handle a particular situation. You look at how Muhammad did it or what Muhammad had to say about it, maybe about, divorce or something like that. So if you don't have a clear teaching in the Quran about it, you go through the body of hadith, and there's all these traditions, which include not only the story or the quote from the Prophet, but also include a kind of like a telephone game, a chain of attributions. So-and-so said that so-and-so said that so-and-so said that Muhammad said X. And that's important because since there's this vast, vast body of all these oral traditions claiming that the Prophet said or did this or that, Muslims will, the imams will actually study what's the reliability and the authority of the people who transmitted the saying or transmitted the story about Muhammad, and how does that weigh into how you consider it when trying to come up with a decision. So anyway, the highest authority is the Quran, second authority is the Hadith. Below that you ask, what is the consensus of the Muslim community, right? Is there something where there's a tradition that this is the way Muslims have always done it, or this is the way all Muslims seem to have a consensus or agreement that a situation ought to be handled or an action ought to be done? So that takes the third level of authority. And then finally, the lowest level authority is the personal judgment and reasoning of the imam. If something is not clearly taught by the consensus of the Muslim world, or by the Hadith or by the Quran, then he has to come up with his own judgment on it. Okay, so it's sort of really fairly complex process, and hopefully, as you can see, as you think about all the different ethical situations and legal situations that may arise in the Muslim world, this actually comes to be a sort of a vast body of study. The imams are what we try to refer to as the Muslim clergy, closest equivalent to a Christian priesthood or ministry. But it's really has this kind of judicial element to it, this sort of, determining, not questions of theology and philosophy the way that others might do, but more a sense of sort of, what is the ethical standing and the legal standing of this or that particular kind of action. Okay, so that's sort of a quick overview of the nature of the Muslim religion and its place and sort of rise in society. In the next video lecture, I will go on to talk a little bit about some of the other things going on economically, politically in the Muslim world and in Africa. Thank you.